Hey everybody, it's Thursday, and Thursday is my day out. I'm back in Bentonville today and just trying to enjoy a little bit of our fall for the next few days. We are headed for a cold snap, I guess, this weekend, and all the leaves will probably fall like in a day because once it gets really cold, everything just starts to shrivel and die. But today it is supposed to be a high of like 70, and it's still pretty early in the morning. It's not even 10 yet, and so I think we're at like 60, and it's a little breezy, and so it is a little chilly. And so my goal this morning, I said all that to say, my goal this morning was to find a place where I could sit and read in a fall sort of atmosphere for a few minutes. I really wanted to finish the October section of notes from Walnut Tree Farm by Roger Deakin because it is November 6th, so I need to start on November. But I didn't get all the October done, so I was going to do that because, you know, it's a very atmospheric cover for fall, and just to sit out here before the sun comes out and enjoy the crispness and the colors and this pretty spot here in front of my library. We followed a footpath across fields of cows to the ruined stump of the great oak of Newland, once one of the biggest in England. The tree came down in a blizzard in 1955, and its giant stump was still there, a hollowed reef of brown and half-charred oak surrounding a dust bowl created by the cattle. The charring must have been the result of either lightning or a half-hearted attempt to burn out the stump. There was plenty of the original oak lying there in a ruined heap. I paced out the diameter, and it looked like 20 feet. This made the tree incredibly ancient. I stuffed a piece of the great oak under my cardigan and walked back with it to the car. Shameful souvenir hunting, but why leave it to waste in the field and end up in a farmer's bonfire? A yard or two from the remains of the old oak, a new tree had been planted, presumably about 15 years after the demise of the original. It was even producing acorns. Hey everyone, this morning I am out at a lake in my town. It's very near my home, and it's one of my favorite places to be all year round, but mostly in the fall because the colors are so beautiful. And this is actually, according to our meteorologists, the last day for us to enjoy all of the beautiful fall colors. It's like the peak day, I guess, or we have like this little period, right? Like this few days where it's like the peak day, and then they're like, all right, this is your last day, better take advantage of it because everything's going to change tomorrow. Well, this is the last day for 2025. Tomorrow, sometime tonight actually, is supposed to get really cold, Arkansas cold, which is like lows in the 20s and highs in the 40s. So then everything's going to turn like brown and crunchy and, you know, fall to the ground. So we'll have leaf crunching season, and that'll be fun. But looking at it up in the trees, I guess this is the last day. So I decided to come out and share with you guys my October reading wrap up. So this is November 8th. So my goals for October were to read for the Victober challenge, which is reading Victorian literature, you know, things written by Victorians that Victorians would have read. And then also Gothic literature. And I was focusing on Gothic classics. So I ran a reading challenge called Gothic October. And so those were my two, you know, real reading challenges that I wanted to participate in. So I did 4 books that either fit Gothic October or Victober. And then I did 4 books that were just whatever. So for my Gothic October challenge, I read kind of 3.5 books. So let me talk about the half book first. I read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, which is not completely a Gothic, but it does have Gothic elements. The story is about a young boy named Pip who lives with his sister and her husband. They don't have any children, and Pip and the sister's parents have passed away. And so they live pretty simply. Joe, the brother-in-law, has a blacksmith shop, and Pip is there kind of as his apprentice. And they're just living, they're not necessarily at poverty level, but they're just simple, very simple family with just a little bit, to get by on. And so that's his expectation in life, right? Is to grow up to be a blacksmith like Joe and maybe take over the shop someday and maybe, marry a girl from the neighborhood and have a great and simple life. A couple of different people sort of affect Pip's life as a child outside his family. One is a escaped criminal that he meets down by the river. He brings him some food, and then that character actually sort of appears throughout the story. And then also Miss Havisham and her ward, Estella. Estella is around Pip's age, and Miss Havisham is a woman who has just lived her whole life basically in her home. She walks around in her wedding dress of maybe 20-ish years ago, where she was jilted at the altar, and she so much was destroyed emotionally that now she just lives in this mansion with Estella, being kind of crazy in her tattered wedding dress, and dusty cobweb covered wedding feasts is still out on the table, and she's still got things on her dressing table that she was going to use for her wedding, and her shoes, and she's got like one shoe on and all this crazy stuff. She basically just froze herself in time. Anyway, she's very eccentric, and she plays a big part in Pip's upbringing as well. So Pip's life is just kind of getting weirder by the minute, and one day he finds out that he has a benefactor. Someone has anonymously given him some money, and everything has changed for him now. He has the expectations now of living as a much higher class citizen, with some money and education and all the stuff. And then the rest of the story is just really about how he handles that, and how those other characters that I mentioned, the guy down by the river and Miss Havisham and Estella, how they kind of play into Pip's life and their presence in his life and what they mean to him really shape who he is. The gothic parts of the story involve Miss Havisham and her weird house and her weird behavior. The rest of it really is just Victorian London. I really enjoyed reading the descriptions of the Thames this time. I felt like I could picture them in my head better than I did when I first read this 10 years ago. This time reading the story, I picked up on a lot more, having now been there several times and spent time near the Thames and read about the history of it and all that. I got a lot more out of the setting of this book than I did the first time around. I felt that I had quite a bit less compassion towards Pip than I did the first time, and I had a little bit more compassion towards Estella, and I kind of liked Miss Havisham, and even though she sort of was bringing Estella up to be a man-hater, I still sort of appreciated her character and kind of laughed at it. I did have quite a bit of thoughts about this book that I put in my Goodreads review, so I will just leave the link to that in the description box if you guys want to read that, because it does contain a lot of spoilers, so you guys can decide if you want to go and read that. So another book that I read in the month that goes right along with this is a book called Havisham by Ronald. And that is a modern retelling of the story of Miss Havisham from Great Expectations, where the story of Great Expectations is about Pip and his sort of coming of age. This story is about Miss Havisham's coming of age. The idea for this story I think was pretty good, but I didn't necessarily like the execution of it. I'll just say it, I really feel like this story would have been completely different having been written by a woman. The author was trying to clearly show the difference between the Miss Havisham before she was jilted at the altar and then the Miss Havisham after. However, I don't really feel like he got into the head of who she was and kept that thought consistently. So before being jilted, she was extremely naive. She trusted everybody. She didn't understand how people could take advantage of her, and that's fair. But afterward, she just became so over the top, just mean, and so just
self-absorbed and self-assured just overnight. Like it was really odd how she just suddenly changed her character so much, and I don't think that necessarily happened. I don't think that what happened to her and the way in which the author sort of played this jilting out, I don't think that was enough to change the core of who she was as much as he did here. One thing I did get out of this story was just I just took the time to really analyze Miss Havisham and her thinking and motivation. And this story especially makes her out to be, after she was jilted, just a very man-hating, independent, ultra-feminist, just sort of militant almost man-hater. I don't think Dickens made her out to be that harsh. I think that it was kind of a game for Miss Havisham and not necessarily so much hate. But it really made me think about like that mentality. So Miss Havisham locks herself up in her house, right, for the rest of her life. She's still wearing her old wedding dress, like I said. She's still, got all her stuff out. Like, she's just not moving on with life because this man had wrecked her. On the flip side, the Havisham of this story is very... wants to be very independent and independent-minded, and says that there's no need for men, and that women would be so much better without men, and just kind of that mentality. But if that's the case, why is she letting this man wreck the rest of her life, right? Like, move on. Go be that independent woman. Go do the stuff. Go have the life that you supposedly don't need a man for. If you cannot live your life to the point where you're going to live the rest of your days in a tattered, disgusting dress and, in darkness and antisocial behavior, then maybe you did need that man after all. Like, I don't know. It's just a weird, it's just a weird concept. But, so I don't know, like, I just didn't enjoy how this author did this. And I do think that if a woman would have written it from the perspective of, like, then it wouldn't have been quite so, like, obviously, it wouldn't have been quite such an obvious personality shift, because especially if you're wanting to live life as an independent woman, like, the core of who you are is really important. And, I don't know. Anyway, it didn't work for me. We'll just leave it at that. All right. And then another Gothic book that I read was called Spindrift by Phyllis. So my mom had given me a big stack of kind of vintage Gothics that she and my grandmother had enjoyed. And so I was showing those off earlier in the year, and then talked about how I wanted to read some of them in October. So Spindrift is one of those. And it was, just your typical Gothic story. The author kind of pulled out like every Gothic trope she could possibly think of and packed them all into the story. It's a young girl named Christy who has just left an institution. She had lost her father, and he, had suddenly died, and she actually had, seen him, and so that was just really traumatic for her, and like it would be for anyone, right? And later we find out that she was actually exhibiting like the normal emotions people would exhibit if they went through that. But she kind of had a nervous breakdown and wasn't really able to speak for herself. And so her family put her in an institution for a few months. So the story's message is kind of like, just because I have different emotions about things doesn't mean I'm crazy. It just means I'm human, right? So I think that was kind of the story that the author was trying to tell. But anyway, so Chrissy gets out of this institution. She goes with her husband, and they go back to his ancestral home where his mother is there and has been caring for their young son while she has been in the institution. It turns out that Christy's mother-in-law is pretty possessive, and she wants the son for her own, like, forever, doesn't want to give up, any sort of say over him. And because she sort of controls them financially and, whatever, the husband has no backbone and won't he takes the side of the mother. And so Christy claims that her father actually was murdered, and she feels like there's people in the family who knew what happened. And so the story is just kind of, follows her trying to figure out what happened to her father, her whole family gaslighting her, trying to get her son back, yet the grandmother has filled his head full of all of these, lies about her and all these things. And so it's just kind of like the plight of Christy. It was a good story, kept my attention. One of the things that has been said about Phyllis Whitney is her characters are like a little too good as far as morally. And so, I have no problem with that. It makes her fiction a little cleaner than some others. So it was a good read. And of course, I've read stuff by her before and will read more by her in the future. Another classic Gothic that I read was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. There's been a lot of talk about that throughout October. Several people that I watch read Rebecca, and others put it on their list of great Gothic favorites. It wasn't the first Gothic to be written, but it was definitely one of the best. And so if you haven't read it, definitely do. I made a whole video actually, really kind of going in depth on different elements of the story. You guys can check that out, put it in the description box. But it does contain all the spoilers, so if you have not read the story and want to, you may want to avoid that video. But it's basically the story of a unnamed woman who is serving as a companion to an older wealthy woman, and they're at Monte Carlo, and she ends up meeting and falling in love with Max de Winter, who is a wealthy estate owner, and they have a whirlwind romance. They get married and they go to his home, and everything starts getting weird. Max has been married before to a woman named Rebecca, and her essence still permeates this whole estate. There are servants there who are loyal to her. There are people who are constantly bringing up her memory. And this unnamed woman, just called Mrs. De Winter, they never do give her name. And, of course, that's symbolic to show that she has no place where Rebecca has dominance and that sort of thing. She is just more and more sort of thrown into this crazy desire to be just like Rebecca was, right? And so she's basically just insecure in her marriage. Max is quite a bit older than her, and she came from a lower unwealthy class, and so she just wants to be his number one and be his wife. The truth is she is his number one, and he does see her as a fresh start. However, she can't see that, and she has a lot of insecurities and worried that he's just constantly thinking about Rebecca and all that stuff. There's a big twist that happens about chapter 18, 19 or so, and then the story just really sort of flies from there. So if you have attempted to read this and you did get bogged down in the beginning, just trust the process, because everything that happens in the first chapters of this story is applicable. And the Mrs. De Winter, the unnamed Mrs. De Winter's constant just, negativity about herself and dogging on herself can get really frustrating after a while. But when you get to, sort of the chapter 18, 19 spot and things start being revealed, you recognize everything you just read totally applied, and it was for a reason. And yeah, you got to read this story. It's really great. If you don't want to read the book, the 1940 version of the movie with Laurence Olivier and Joan Fontaine, I think, is fantastic too. It sticks pretty close to the book. They had to edit out some things just for, the times, and they felt that was too much to be putting in front of audiences. But for the most part, it sticks to the story, and you could watch that, and then you could watch my video, and you'd be set with the story. So the last Gothic I read for October was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And I read that about every other year, and each time I focus on something different. This time I focused on the character of Heathcliff. And the story is basically about a family living in a place called Wuthering Heights. It's the second largest estate in the area. And it starts off as a somewhat happy home. The Earnshaw family lives there, and it's a mother, father, and two children, Catherine and Hindley. One day their father goes to town and he brings home presents for the kids and a present for the mother, which is a little boy he found somewhere. And he was starving and obviously homeless. And so Mr. Earnshaw takes compassion and brings him home. He's called Heathcliff, and he grows up to be always at odds with Hindley and madly in love, stress on the word madly, with Catherine. Him and Catherine are inseparable. They are in love with each other, but it's weird because Cathy is pretty self-centered and Heathcliff is pretty self-conscious. One day Cathy meets the Lintons, who are the neighbors in the largest estate in the area, and everything changes between her and Heathcliff because the Lintons are clean and proper, and the Earnshaws are pretty wild. Cathy eventually ends up marrying Edgar Linton, and Heathcliff goes crazier than he was before. And the whole story is just kind of about the madness of a whole lot of people. People have called this a love story. It's definitely not a love story, but it's a twisted love story. But if you go into it, one, realizing it's not a love story, two, everybody's pretty much hateable, and three, it really is one of the most depressing books you'll ever read, you can probably get something out of the story. It is probably my favorite book ever, but I really can't tell you why. So I said that at this time I focused on Heathcliff, and the one thing that I really noticed this time about him was he acts like he wants to destroy everyone and everything just because of his anger and hurt over the things that have happened to him in life, the fact that Cathy left him, etc. But at one point he says, "I have lost the faculty of enjoying their destruction." And that just really sort of shouted out to me. He probably didn't actually want to destroy people all along. He just didn't know how to love, right? And the fact that he couldn't actually end up destroying people in the end, love wins, right? And I'm not one for pithy sayings on the back of Christian screen printed t-shirts, but in this story, love actually does win. And there is a somewhat hopeful ending, if not happy. It's definitely hopeful. And Heathcliff didn't win. But the thing is Heathcliff didn't win not because he couldn't destroy everybody. Heathcliff didn't win because he wasted so much time trying to destroy people. But I don't think he's a fully evil character, because every now and then just a little piece of compassion comes out, or just sorrow. There's a point where one of the characters just finds him breaking down crying. It really is a case of a rough exterior, not a completely hard heart. So anyway, I have more compassion for Heathcliff this time around. All right, so a couple of those counted for Victober also. That would have been Great Expectations and Wuthering Heights. The other book that I read that covered Victober was The Prisoner of Zenda by Anthony Hope. Now, this is a book that had been on my TBR for quite a while. Somewhere back in the day, I had read something that had that on on a list of books to read, and so I bought a copy, and then it just sat on my shelf forever. And so I said in October I was going to read this book. I did. I liked it okay. It's definitely like an adventure story, and I'm really not so much an adventure reader, but I did enjoy it. It's basically about this guy who he lives in England, and he's going to travel to the country of Ruritania, which is like a neighboring country. It's a fictional country, obviously. And so he is like on his travels, he ends up encountering a bunch of guys. One of them looks like exactly like him. Turns out that is like the king of Ruritania, and he is detained and can't go on being the king for a time. And so this guy ends up posing as him, even to the point of like being crowned and having a parade, all of these things. Then they find out that the actual king has been captured by people who are trying to take over the throne, right? And so this guy ends up like trying to both rescue the king and live life as the king and make sure that nobody knows what's going on, and he falls in love and all these things happen. It's a pretty short book, but a lot happens in it. It's very fast moving and adventuresome. So I did enjoy my read of that. I guess there's more like in a series, and I guess I was reading up on it. It kind of sparked a genre and just like fan fiction even maybe, and just like there's more to this story out there, but I don't really think I will probably read any more to this story. But I did enjoy that one. All right, another book I read for the month doesn't really count for Victober or Gothic October, but it was called The Cottage Fairy Companion by Paola Merrill. She is a YouTuber who ended up writing this book. She is kind of a mix of like things that she would have written probably as video scripts for her channel, and then like some recipes and craft ideas, and I enjoyed reading it. Some of her thoughts were very similar to things that I have just sort of built my own life on, and I made a whole video on that as well, so I'll put that one down in the description box also. I won't talk too much about that one just because, you know, I just made a whole video on it. So it was a pretty good book. The basic kind of overarching idea that she was putting across in this book was that you don't have to spend a lot of money, spend a lot of travel time, whatever, to go and find like the experience, right? You can make the cozy, simple living sort of cottagey experience for yourself, right where you're at, mostly by changing your mindset and then simplifying, slowing down, that kind of stuff, right? And so, check out my video on it. My video is really great. And then the final book that I finished like minutes before midnight on October 31st was Before Your Memory Fades by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And I read the first one, Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And then this was book 3. I don't know why I ended up buying book 3 instead of book 2. Anyway, I did not enjoy this one as much as I enjoyed Before the Coffee Gets Cold. So this is a series of books, and they are set in coffee shops in Japan. They are translated works. Apparently, the first one at least like was really popular, bestseller. They made a movie out of it, whatever. All in Japan. They've been translated to English, and I've read quite a few Japanese translated books. I would say that this one, the Before the Coffee Gets Cold, is probably the best translated, and like, I don't know, like I enjoyed it the most. It was like the least choppy. But this third one, I don't know if it's the same translator, but it was a little more rough than the first one was. That's okay. That's not that big of a deal. What really got me was this book was just so depressing. The idea of these stories is that these are special coffee shops that feature a certain table with a certain chair, and when you sit there, you can be transported to go and visit anyone in the past or future that you choose. You can only do this one time in your life, so you have to be really careful about the choice you make. And you can only visit them for the length of time that it takes for your coffee to get cold. So you sit in the chair, you tell the waitress when you are ready, and when you are ready, she starts pouring the coffee. And as she's pouring the coffee and you're sort of breathing in the steam of it, you are being transported, to this, future or past place with the person that you wanted to see. So maybe, you want to see your friend who has passed away, or you want to see what your daughter's going to look like in the future, or whatever. You can do that, but you can only stay there until the coffee gets cold. You have to drink all of the coffee before it gets cold, or you will die. So I really can't remember sort of the overall mood of the first book, whether or not it was very depressing, but this third book just kind of was. And I don't know if it's just a cultural thing or if I'm just sensitive, but death is just like no big deal in these books. And like, I just want some happy endings. There are 4 stories in each of these books, and they feature characters that are interconnected. And I think kind of in each one, someone is trying to maybe take care of unfinished business, sort of thing. Like, what would you do if you could go back and talk to somebody again? What would you say differently? Whatever. The thing is like in these stories, nothing actually changes. It doesn't change the timeline. It doesn't change anything in the present. So it's more for your own inner peace that you got to go back and say what you wanted to say, or see, you know, who you wanted to see again, or, you know, in some cases characters have like a terminal illness, and so they go to the future because they want to see people and see that everything's okay in the future, that kind of thing. And I think it could be done, you know, in a positive way, but I think they're meant to be positive, actually. They just bummed me out. And I think, kind of circling all the way back to Ms. Havisham, I really think that the deal is, I really think that what I got out of these is just the reminder that what's done is done, right? And the life that we lived with our loved ones, you know, whatever it was, like, that's what it was. Whether it was good or bad or back and forth or whatever, it is what it is, and you can't change the past. Being able to go back into the past and say things I didn't say, or, you know, apologize for things I didn't apologize, or whatever, would that settle it in my heart? For me, I don't think so, because it didn't actually happen, right? It didn't change anything in the future. When I come back to the future, I know that they didn't actually ever hear that apology, or didn't actually ever really say the thing. And so their reaction, was it real? I don't know. Like, and if nothing changes in the present, then even if I went back, you know, say I went back to my husband and I in high school, right? And when we were, you know, 16 and 17, and I had said something, you know, really jerkish, and I want to like take it back and tell him I'm sorry and apologize, whatever. And so then we fast forward to now, when we're both 46, like, he won't even remember that I said that, right? Because nothing changes in the present. So what was the point? I don't know. I guess that for some, that would settle things in their own heart because they got to say it. But if nothing actually changes, then you didn't actually say it, and they didn't actually hear it, and it didn't actually settle in their heart, and therefore, what was the point? I feel like that would bring up more emotion than not, right? So I am going to continue reading these. I did go and buy number 2. I think it's okay that I'm kind of reading them out of order. Like, it's not necessarily a continuing storyline as it is just stories about these characters and what happens in this cafe. And so I am going to read that. I'm probably going to start it this weekend. You know, and really what I'm getting out of it is just like psychological, philosophical sort of ideas, and not necessarily any like closure for anybody. So that's what I read for October. It was a pretty great reading month. I didn't get as many books read as I normally do, but the things that I did read caused me to think and to respond. Like I said, I made 2 response videos this month, so that's pretty crazy. And I honestly think that that is how I would prefer it to be, right? I would prefer to maybe read less and get more out of it, have more time to write about it and respond, than just, you know, consuming, and never actually sort of processing and assimilating and responding. So yeah, I feel like it was a good, successful October. Now we're in November. It is November the 8th. So the Read What You Own challenge with Criminale and co-hosts, that started on November 5th, Guy Fawkes Day. And that's his kind of traditional day to start. And so I have made myself a goal to read 25 books from things that I already owned prior to November 5th. That's why I ran out and grabbed that that second book in that series, as well as a couple of other things. I should probably make a book haul video, I think, because I've got a pretty good stack to share with you guys. But anyway, yeah, started that on the 5th, and I've got to read 25 books before I can dip into anything that I have purchased since November 5th. The challenge usually is to not buy anything after you start the challenge, but this is like the best book shopping season for me. And so I decided just to, whatever I buy, whatever I accumulate, I will just put on a shelf and not touch it until I have gotten through 25 books from my own shelves, either by reading them or DNFing them. So anyway, I got my first one done last night, and I've got this whole day and probably most of tomorrow just to do whatever I want. So I'm hoping to read quite a bit and get some more of those books knocked off of that list. And then also November is nonfiction November, which I am not feeling so much like reading nonfiction right now. Usually I read a lot of nonfiction, but I'm really just kind of reading classics and cozy stuff and just chilling out. Things that make me think and wonder and imagine and daydream and hopefully write about as well. So yeah, having a good season. Just trying to chill. Gonna literally chill tomorrow when it gets really cold. Hope everybody is doing well, having a great day, having a good weekend. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.